Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now I've got a very special guest. He has worked for numerous independent wrestling promotions across the country. He's traveled all over the world, and I'm pleased to welcome him to the show today, the one, the only, Andrew Anderson. Welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
How are you, buddy? How you doing, Stanley?
Doing fantastic.
Can I call you Stan?
Either one is fine.
I'm going to call you
Stan or
Stanley.
All right, there you go. All right, there we go. So tell me about your childhood and upbringing. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. Very, very Italian and Polish area, right across from the Hudson River. So I was literally 15 minutes from the Lincoln Tunnel, 15 minutes from the George Washington Bridge. So we were always taking trips into Manhattan, Madison Square Garden, watch wrestling as I was growing up, old WWE. And always wrestling was part of my life. And, I grew up as a young athlete, but never expected to become a wrestler. Never expected to become a wrestler. I was I was in the music business. I was a performer. I performed in a lot of glam metal bands. That was my aspiration upon graduating high school, was to be a lead singer in a metal band. That was a lot of fun, but there was so much competition. Not like wrestling doesn't have competition. You have a better chance of making it in wrestling than you do in the music business.
It's hard because you have to find something that is unique to you and makes you stand out, because you're dealing with so many people that are vying for spots, just like with professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And so who are some of your favorite singers growing up? You talk about music and...
Oh, that's easy. Yeah, Ozzy Osbourne was my one of my major influences. Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, Ronnie Dio from Rainbow, Black Sabbath, and his own band Dio. I loved Rob Halford and Judas Priest, Bruce Dickinson and Iron Maiden. I loved Mick Jagger, the Stones, the classic rock musicians. I was into Kiss, massive Kiss fan. Growing up, they were probably the first music I ever heard in my life that turned me on to it was the Monkees, believe it or not. And I would later on become friends with Mickey Dolenz and Peter Tork. And it was pretty cool. And, so that was pretty wild. But the biggest influence was Kiss. Kiss was everything. The Kiss and Black Sabbath. They were and Deep Purple. Alice Cooper. Those were my influences. And to be Ace Frehley's bodyguard later on in life, and to bodyguard for Kiss, the band itself, and then eventually for Ace Frehley himself, and becoming a personal friend of his over the years. I know Ace for 30 years. When I was before I even became a wrestler, I was friends with him. I was hanging out with him in the China Club. So we ran with a lot of mutual friends over the years. So it was pretty cool.
That's amazing, getting to rub shoulders with so many people in the industry. And those are definitely some good acts for sure, artists and bands. Wrestling, you'd mentioned earlier, you grew up watching it, became a fan at such a young age. Who were some of your favorite wrestlers growing up to watch?
Oh, man. I'll give you a little bit of rundown. The first wrestler I ever saw perform was Greg the Hammer Valentine. I saw him perform. He was wrestling a guy. I'll never forget the match. It was on UHF TV. He was wrestling against Joe Turco. And years later, Greg Valentine became one of my best friends in the business, and he influenced me a lot outside of the business as far as showed me how to make money and stay relevant and everything. So Greg was really an important part of my life. Wrestling wise, my favorite wrestlers growing up was Superstar Billy Graham. When I was a kid, they used to throw out recycling in the 70s, and they used to wrap it up with twine, newspapers and magazines, and put them outside as people's doors, and the recycling people would pick it up. So there was recycling even in the 70s. So for people who say they never recycled, they did. And I saw in this magazine while I was coming home from school, I was a Catholic schoolboy coming back from Catholic school. I saw this magazine with this bloody guy being choked by another bloody guy, which was Bruno Sammartino choking Superstar Billy Graham. I thought this was so much gore. I thought it was a horror magazine because up until then, the only magazines I really read were any rock and roll magazines and Famous Monsters of Filmland, which had horror stuff, horror genre, which I really also love. You can see the action figures behind me, some of them on in my one room. Uh, so getting back to that, I would get a ticket to see Superstar Billy Graham wrestle against Dusty Rhodes because the magazines were always back then. You didn't have internet; you had magazines. Sports Review Wrestling, Bill Apter and George Napolitano and those guys were all taking pictures of the matches, and wrestling was always a few months behind by the time the magazine articles came out. So you saw all that was happening in the Mid South, in Florida, in at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, in Canada, in Montreal, and everywhere. But you and Georgia Championship Wrestling, but you never. The only thing we saw was WWWF, which was Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and occasionally a little gem comes up on UHF with Championship Wrestling from Florida. And so you would see that. So I learned, I recognized all the names of all these wrestlers from the magazines, and I'd see them wrestle on TV. And it was amazing how these guys came in and out of the circuits back and forth, you know. So, um, well, I'm going off on a tangent here. So, WWE, that's how I saw Superstar Billy Graham against Dusty Rhodes. And then from there, I was hooked. And then I guess, you know, between high school, playing in bands, collecting comic books and monster magazines, and, you know, doing my own thing, eventually wrestling faded out of my life. And with the dawn of WrestleMania, wrestling became a big thing again. I became into it again. But then I graduated college. And I graduated college. I was a wrestling fanatic. At this point, National Wrestling Alliance was on a regular basis. We were watching cable TV, the NWA, and all the programming, AWA, Vern Gagne's AWA. It was great. So then eventually, you know, I was working at a bar. I was working as an investment banker when I graduated college, and I was working at bars on weekends, bouncing. And in walks Jimmy Superfly Snuka with the Metal Maniac, and it was all history from there. I became a wrestler. I dropped everything I wanted to do. I went pretty much joined the circus, carried Jimmy's bags, met Gino Caruso, introduced me to Gino Caruso. They brought me to Killer Kowalski School briefly, but it was too far to go from Jersey to Boston. So East Coast Pro Wrestling at Lake Hiawatha, they brought me there, and Metal Maniac and Jimmy trained me hands on with Gino, and you know, it was really, really cool. So it was just a lot of ups and downs, but for the first 2 years, and this all happened in between 92 and 95. And then eventually I became full blown wrestler on the road traveling. So working on all the circuits, working on smaller promotions all over the country, and then doing little bits and pieces here for WWE and WCW, trying to get a job with them. You know, met Kevin Sullivan and backstage at WCW, and from there on started a close relationship with him. Then wound up meeting Brutus Beefcake, who took me on the road with him, and Greg Valentine, Tito Santana, those guys, Tony Atlas. Been on the road with all those legends, and you know, it's been a great career. You know, I mean, I've wrestled every major name, have feuded with Vader, teamed up with Vader against the Steiners over and over again. I mean, it was just a lot of the same people. So the physicality of the business is a lot. I mean, to do this for 32 years. For 32 years, I've been wrestling. And in 32 years, I've had only 8 months off totally. So 4 months. 4 months during COVID, and before that, in 2008, I had 4 months during my knee surgery when I was filming The Wrestler. I had a torn up knee, and I had to get that. The Wrestler was wrapped, I think, in March or April, and I had the surgery in. I want to say I might have had the surgery that April. So, but I filmed my scenes in The Wrestler. Had a bum knee. I wrestled a pretty crappy match, so It was my match itself was scrap, but I played myself in the movie, which earned me Screen Actors Guild credit and put me on the map and got me all the Doritos commercials, the Skittles commercials, the Colcrest Pharmaceutical print ad, the Skittles print ad. I was pretty much the poster boy for Skittles. I did a Super Bowl commercial for Doritos. Um, um, a lot of commercials and a lot of appearances in various movies, TV series, Gotham, Sneaky Pete. Um, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a fun career, and I just did a couple of scenes for Daredevil: Born Again about 6 months ago, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like you've had a remarkable career getting to not only do stuff in the wrestling business, but outside of the business as far as acting and television and film. Being a wrestler, it's not easy breaking in and meeting Snuka and meeting all these legends. You'd have to get starstruck, I'd imagine. Talk to me about the training process because it's very grueling, I'd imagine.
Well, when I trained, it was a little bit different. I trained in East Coast Pro Wrestling. The ring was an old boxing ring that was converted. There were two rings. He had an old boxing ring that we used to practice in. We landed on mats. First, we landed on just mats on the concrete itself. So we landed on the mats on the concrete itself. That got us ready for the next level, which was a boxing ring, which was an old boxing ring. And so we landed on softer sidewalks in that boxing ring. And then from there, you went into an old WWF TV ring that they had an East Coast Pro Wrestling, the old ring they had, which I think it's long been sold. And we trained in that one. That was a big ring. I think
It's
that was
like
a
the
20.
red, white, and blue.
Yeah, that was a 20 by 20 ring. So it was like running across a ballpark every time you hit the ropes. And then they scaled it down to an 18 by 18, which was great. And then a lot of the companies that I would work for back then all had 20 by 20 rings. So, uh, it's like the WWE rings they use now, which are like, I think they're bigger. I think they're all 20 by 20 now. So, but it was cool. The process was a lot of squats, um, a lot of calisthenics and learning how to fall, learning how to break your fall, learning how to fall properly, and using crash pads for certain stunts. I was never a. I tell you, these kids now are better athletes than we ever were. They're phenomenal athletes. I mean, they are tremendous. I can't believe this. They make me feel archaic. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when I see these guys wrestling, I'm like, I feel like when Eric Clapton and Pete Townsend from the Who went to see Jimi Hendrix play, and they were like, well, we our careers are over, and then Jimi Hendrix uh, passes away and everything, but then you have guys like Richie Blackmore and Tony Iommi look over and they see Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen, and they're like, whoa, I guess each generation came up with a new hook and more better capabilities and stuff like that. Not that they're better, but it's a different style, and it tweaks your style. They pay homage to your style, but or the old school style, and they take it to a new level. And these wrestlers, like Braun Breaker, he takes Rick and Scott Steiner to a whole different level. But he's still not going to be Rick or Scott Steiner. You know what I'm saying? It's just insane. It's just insane.
He's very agile, and the
Tremendously
movements that
fast.
he does, it's incredible.
The energy,
Speed.
the speed, it just cheer on like a I couldn't even. I don't even know how to. I was Roadrunner on steroids.
Yeah, like when he does his spear, it's like boom, like right there,
I
like
mean, Goldberg had a spear, Edge had a spear, Roman Reigns has a spear, but
Rhino.
Rhino had a spear, but his spear is like, bam, man, wow, So hats off to him. I wrestled his dad many times and his uncle, and he's just incredible. I mean, and then you got guys like who I worked there, helped form them in the business, like Damian Priest. I worked with him a lot when he was breaking in the business. Phenomenal. The kid is he's always going to be the kid to me. Um, Damian Priest is just great. I mean, I wrestled when he was Louis the Punisher, and he's just tremendous. I told him, he used to come to me and say, "I'm too old. Oh, they're not going to look at me. They're not going to look at me." I was like, "Dude, you're the total package. You could do it. You got to just get out there." He leaned out, went to Ring of Honor, leaned out, went to NXT. He looked phenomenal, honed his craft. He is just one of the he's the future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many guys and girls now. I mean, as far as like the women, I mean, Tiffany Stratton, perfect example. I mean, Charlotte Flair, another one.
She reinvents herself. She comes back and looks different. Okay, they can say she had plastic surgery, whatever, but she reinvents herself. She comes back stronger than ever. She's like I don't consider her more like her dad. I consider her more like Eddie Guerrero. She'll go out and come back bigger and stronger, and leaner and better looking. You know what I'm saying? As far as wrestling wise go, her career is just tremendous.
Yes,
Yeah.
so many people out there today that are just incredibly talented athletes. Um, with you, did it come easier or harder as far as getting the moves down? Because it seems like it's a workout, but it's a different kind of workout.
Well, with me, it was I was always a brawler. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I was a wrestler when a technical wrestler. We're all wrestlers. We all know the moves. I do, but I had a certain aspect what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a big Van Vader type, Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, um, with a touch of Don Morocco, who's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. And Don Morocco was a brawler who just had moves. He can work. So I really appreciated that style of wrestling, and so that's what I patterned myself after. And considering I was trained by a high flyer like Jimmy Snuka, who was really a jacked up high flyer for those days. I mean, he was amazing. I also learned how to tone it down and add a little bit of Terry Funk into it, and slow the match down, keep the pace down. Because for the first, I think, 4 years of my career, I was 0 to 60. I was going so fast that the people would tell me, a lot of the vets would tell me, slow down. So now I only have one gear, and that's slow.
Now you've gotten to work a lot of different people, as you've been mentioning. Worked with so many guys. Who've been some of your favorite opponents that you got to wrestle against over the years?
I loved working against Hacksaw. Hacksaw was always fun working with. Tito would always wrestle you. Tito would make you wrestle. Tony Atlas was a great time. I loved working against some of the modern guys, the guys I've broken the business with, like Greek God Papa Don. I liked working a lot with Mario Baccara, who was most sexy, and later on Mario Baccara. I liked working him. I loved working with Crowbar because Crowbar would bring out the best of me. Ace Darling was another guy from the Indies in the Northeast who was just tremendous. Taught me so much. God, the list goes on and on. I mean, I could keep going with names. I had a lot of great tag team partners. Rick Fuller, big Rick Fuller from WCW. We had a lot of fun over the years. Me and Rick Fuller, my late partner Thunderbolt Norton, Mike Thunderbolt Norton was a great guy. I loved working with him. I love teaming with Mustang Mike, who you had on the show recently. Mustang and me and him were longtime tag team as Mean and Lean, and we had the Louisiana straps. We had the Gulf Coast 225 straps and all these different belts. I mean, we had 6-man tag. Two of us had carried 6-man tag belts. So, it was just a lot of fun. I mean, I love tag team wrestling. I still love tag team wrestling. But I like being on my own sometimes too.
Who would you say is like the greatest tag team of all time or your favorite tag team of all time?
Well, I'm biased because one of my best friends was Joe Laurinaitis, Road Warrior Animal. So the Road Warriors to me will always be the greatest of all time. They were the Hulk Hogan. They were the ones who brought it into a new light. They were also the Goldbergs of tag team wrestling. They just wiped people out for number of years. So they were incredible. Tully and Arn, hands down, one of the best. Um, Freebirds, fabulous Freebirds. Um, Dynamite Kid and the British Bulldog, the British
British
Bulldogs,
Bulldogs.
Dynamite, yeah, Dynamite and Davy. Um, the list, there's just so many tag teams out there to name, but yeah, the Road Warriors, the Bulldogs, Tully and Arn, uh, Heart Foundation, uh, Rock and Roll Express. You can't say tag team wrestling without the Rock and Roll Express. Powers of Pain. I love the Powers of Pain. Everybody loved the Powers of Pain and Demolition. You can't beat them. They were just such an under valued team. Brody and Hanson. Brody and Snooker. The Funks, Terry and Dory together, can't beat that. And another one of my favorite tag teams was Doc and Gordy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Those are some good ones.
yeah, yeah. And you really think, but it's most of it's from my era. You know what I'm saying? It's most of it's from my era when I grew up watching. Those are the ones that I grew up watching that I loved. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wrestled a lot of great tag teams too over the years, but those were probably the best.
Now you still keep up with the product today. Who are some of your favorite stars?
I love Damian Priest. I love Braun Strowman. I got to meet him and get stem cells with him about a year ago. Great guy, nice guy. Adam's great guy. Tremendous talent. Uh, Jacob Fatu, man, I know Jake since he was young and he's still young. I mean, I know him when he was out in California killing it with the Almighty Sheik as a tag team up in California, and he's and from SWE Fury, he's there's nobody better than him right now. Nobody better. Nobody
No.
hotter than him. Nobody. He's all over. If you wherever you look, it's Jacob Fatu. He's taken the bloodline to a new level. I love Tamatanga, the whole gimmick with him and Jey Uso. I'm just Kevin Sullivan said that it was the hottest when he was alive. He would always say, "This is the hottest angle ever." In wrestling, and it is. It is the bloodline. The bloodline. I love Gunther. I love Gunther. He's great. I love these guys. I love it. I don't follow AEW. I don't follow AEW. But to me, Chris Jericho right now is the new Ric Flair, for wrestling. So he's the new greatest of all time in my book.
And you talk about Eddie Guerrero and talking about reinventing himself. I mean, Chris Jericho has definitely done exactly that, coming up with these new characters, these new personas, these new gimmicks, and it's definitely reinvented um, so many things about his character over the years. So
Absolutely.
um, yeah, he's definitely up there for sure as one of the greats. I want to switch gears and talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've been involved with a lot of charity organizations, done a lot of charity work over the years. What are some things that you've done to help out in your community as far as
Um, I've done a bench press competition where I did the combine bench press 225. I did it for numerous reps for tomorrow's children. Each rep going for tomorrow's children. Um, I got guys busting me saying, "Oh, each rep wasn't legal. Some of them weren't." But you know what? The fact is, I could take 225 and do 78 reps. Was pretty impressive. Even if I didn't get, they weren't all 100% legal. Um, the other thing I've done a lot work with East Coast Pro Wrestling. They do a lot of charity work for St. Jude's charity. They do. Gino Caruso and East Coast Pro Wrestling do a lot of work for for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So that's one of my primary charities to go to. Tomorrow's Children is another one. I've done a lot of stuff with Tomorrow's Children and the Make a Wish Foundation. Tomorrow's Children out of Hackensack University Medical Center in the '90s. I did a lot with them. I came around at Christmas time, would go around visiting the kids with cancer, which was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done,
mm,
because I have two daughters and I would always, that's the first thing you think of.
yeah, I mean, when you're talking to kids that are going through so much in their lives, I mean, it really is heartwarming when you see people that you can help make a difference in their life that are going through something, take them away from all the pain, and just provide them with entertainment and provide them with joy for just even 5 to 10 minutes of their time.
Yep. I also do something, I would do it every year. I haven't done it in 2 years, but I would do tattooing for autism for Tattoo Tony in New Jersey, and he'd run. He's one of the guys, the tattooing guys, who was on TV a lot, and he's actually Samoan too. So he would do have a lot of the bloodline guys there too. Do stuff with him like Samu, the head shrinker Samu, which is actually um, the father of Lance Anoa'i,
Hmm.
so who's in NXT right now. So and a good kid, great kid, and I always said he was going to be a big breakaway star. So
When you're going to these events like Make a Wish or just meeting children that are going through illnesses, um, is there like a period of time or a moment to you that meant so much that was really touched your heart?
They all listen, Stan. They all touch your heart. You know, you see things you that you really don't want to see. You know, kids hooked up to machines, kids missing body parts, kids. Yeah, that's the worst thing you can ever think of. And the kids with no hair because they're going through chemo and radiation, and they have such a different outlook on life than an adult going through that. I wish some of the adults that have terminal diseases or crippling diseases would come visit these kids, because they might actually get some more will to live by just speaking to these children. These children have like an amazing constitution and love for life, you know, because some of them, that's all they've known is sickness. So when that's all you know, you try to reach out and live your life and make the best of it what you can. You know, I mean, these kids are freaking stronger than we will ever be. Like I said, the new generation of wrestlers is better athletes than my generation ever was. These kids are just amazing. They're inspirations to us all.
Yeah, I mean, they say children are the future, and making a difference in their life, I feel like is very important and essential. And passing the knowledge and passing it forward really helps.
I've always gone out of my way to help children, to see children, to even with pictures. I mean, sometimes the kid will come up and, you know, you got to be a heel, you got to be in stay in character, you got to chase him away and yell at him, blah blah blah. But then later on, I'll get the little kid on the way out and I'll say, hey, take this. You know, I don't want to break character or piss my agent off and give him something free. You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's all about being nice and being empathetic and being caring, and that's what we're about here at Wrestling with Heart is trying to provide a platform where we can inspire people to do good in the world. And uh, the stuff that you're telling me right now is a perfect example of that.
listen, I ain't exactly the best role model on the planet. You know, I mean, I've had my substance abuse problems. It's been documented. I had, you know, I went through a bad divorce twice. I haven't been the greatest father sometimes to my kids because of all the infidelities and stuff I've done in the past. You know, I haven't been a great role model as far as that goes. But the one constant that I do have is that I love children and I try to, you know, be there for all these organizations. If they need me for something, I do it. You know. So
Yeah.
it's what it's. I think that's what celebrities really should have a calling for. Not only may I know celebrities get paid a god awful amount of money. Some of us don't. Some of us do. But the one constant should be that they should give back to their communities, or at least to the people who don't have that much. Like especially the kids that are sick and in some cases terminal.
Every little bit counts. Every little bit helps. Just goes a long way.
I mean, The Rock is tremendous with charities. He's one guy who's tremendous. So is John Cena, guys like that, and Triple H too. All these guys have always been great. You know, I mean, that's the one thing I got to say is the Nasty Boys, Brian Knobs and Jerry Sags, ball busters that they are, pains in the ass, crazy bastards that they've been. They've always been very good
Hmm.
with charitable organizations.
Hmm.
So
Very, very nice. Very cool. What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
just seeing smiling faces, man. Smiling faces. A smile goes a long way, dude. You know?
Hmm. Absolutely, it does. Well, this has been wonderful, Andrew, getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you on social media, how they can reach you, and find out all the good stuff you're doing?
Drew the Wrestler. I think it's Andrew the Reinforcer on Instagram. Drew the Wrestler. I think it's on X. I'm not sure. Andrew Anderson, Andrew the Reinforcer Anderson, and Andrew Anderson the Reinforcer on Facebook. Um, there's also the Reinforcer Radio, my new podcast. Not your ordinary wrestling podcast, but it's a lot of really cool stuff. It's a lot of rock and roll, a lot of wrestling. My experiences. It's going to be out of the box. It's not all wrestling. It's not all wrestling. We're having guests on to tell their story. It's not about me. It's about them. So that's one way to look at it. I have a great co-host with Jeff Lawhorn. He's a great guy and he's very knowledgeable, and he's the historian alongside me for this journey that we're doing in the Reinforcer Radio, reinforcerradio.com. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Amazon Music, Amazon Podcasts, on YouTube, Apple Music, and Apple Podcasts. So as well as on Facebook and Instagram. That's a whole lot of platforms there for one little radio show.
That's amazing. So cool that you're able to do that, and I wish you all the best. Thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Thank you, guys. All right?
Take care. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.